And we are now live with another Tech Talks from eLearning. Um, we had a really great session 2 or 3 weeks ago about kind of the basics of creating an effective homepage for a Canvas course. And based on some feedback and the interest in that topic, we decided to do a part 2 of that with a little bit more the advanced visual graphic design tips and tricks and tools that can kind of make your homepage look a little splashier. So Nick's got a whole thing planned out here.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it to 30 minutes because I want to be cognizant of people's times, but there's so much that we can dive in here. So I'll just say this as a disclaimer. I'm going to go quick. At any time you have questions, pop in the chat, reach out. Otherwise, feel free to email us. We can help you build these things. Doesn't have to be something you do on your own. So yeah. Let's jump right in. Currently, I have open here just our example homepage from last time. I've put some information in. So we were missing our picture from our instructor, some information about them, contact, office hours, all that fun stuff. So now we've just got a pretty plain homepage. So usually the first thing that people look to do is kind of add some visual element that can kind of anchor the homepage. So a student jumps in, they go, oh, I'm in example course or whatever, because I see that image. I don't even have to read anything. We can take in information from images a lot faster than we can from reading. So just boom, right there, good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool called Unsplash to actually add or find an image to use as a heading banner. The great thing about Unsplash, easy URL to remember, unsplash.com, but also it is freely usable images. So you don't actually have to attribute, though it's always nice to do so. Why I'm looking for that is because it's going to be a banner. It's going to be right at the top. I don't really want an attribute because it can kind of get in the way of the formatting. So normally we want to do that as much as possible. Unsplash is nice because we don't have to. So for our example, we have Dr. Scully. We're making a homepage for her. So I'm going to look up something related to Dr. Scully to find our banner. Just do forensics. Let's search through something preferably not too gory, but a little bit weird. This is what I'm going to use for my banner.
Oh my.
The thing to note, though, is this looks pretty square, right? We want something that's long and kind of crosses the top of the page. So I'm going to download it. I'm going to download a pretty large, actually, I'm going to download the largest one that I can. And these are the dimensions in pixels. Something to note is Canvas. You can only have an image that's about 780 pixels wide. So this one is by far quite a bit bigger than that. So it goes by width and height. So I'm going to download, and then I'm going to jump over actually into PowerPoint to make this into a banner. So already I'm done with Unsplash. We'll close that out for now. I'm going to share PowerPoint really quick and show you how you can really easily make your banners in here. So I've got that massive image. And what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to delete everything in here. And I'm going to go over to design, slide size, and go down to page setup. And this is where I can actually set how many pixels this slide deck is. So I can change those dimensions. So in this case, our width, the maximum width I can have is 780 pixels. I'll just scale everything down. If I go back, we can see that the height hasn't changed. I'm going to go for around 200 to 300 pixels. So we'll probably see 200 pixels. We'll make it kind of a thinner banner. You'll see what that looks like. And you'll notice that it just ends up converting it back into inches because that's the unit that PowerPoint usually will like to put things in. So now I've got this really skinny template that I can bring this image into. So I'm going to go and I'm going to insert picture file. I just downloaded it. Here it is. Insert, and I'll probably do that for me. So let's see if I can get something. This one will be a little bit interesting since I'm trying to make an image that's very square, fit inside a box. It's very not. I kind of want just that weird eye bit because, imagine that's what Dr. Scully would like. So let's try this. I'm going to now come up to File.
And I'll note that over on the left, where you kind of see the thumbnails for each slide, you can see exactly how it's cropping it.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. That's extremely useful. I usually just do it from guessing.
Do it the hard way.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. So now I'm going to export this, and I'm going to choose a file format. I'm going to go PNG because that scales really well.
And it's not letting us see your save dialog, but
okay, so I'm just setting in the width and height based on essentially that information I just put in. Give it a quick name. So this is just literally saving it as a file format, a PNG. Export that. And now let's come back and let's see how I did. That's always the fun part, right? So I'm going to come into here. I'm going to go and edit. I want to put this banner right at the top. Let's upload an image. Like I said, I'll be going through pretty quickly, but let's see if I can find. There's my skull image I just made. Open. Okay, we're doing good so far. I'll probably just select this as decorative since it will be at the top, and I'd rather have somebody with a screen reader read the title or something else first.
Yeah.
So I'm going to submit this.
If you're going to use a page banner image like this, it might be a good idea to have the same image for your course tile.
Yeah. And you could even use that more rectangular one.
Yeah.
Have that kind of element. So I've got the image, it's in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come into our HTML editor. And right now, I'm seeing some funky things. Let's put this in a blank paragraph. And then I'm going to select, I can put it really anywhere. I usually put it right after the source. I go width, 100%. Save that. Let's make sure that took. So what I've just done is I've told Canvas to make this image as wide as the screen is. So this part over here, that's where the student's task or to-do list ends up. But right now it'll scale. So when it goes to a cell phone, this is what it'll look like. So we've just made it extremely accessible, just putting in one tiny bit of code. And just as a reminder, that was an edit. I went over to our rich content or our HTML editor within our rich content editor. And this is all I put in there. Style, width, 100%.
And I just posted that code sample in the chat.
Beat me to it.
And we'll put some of these samples in the YouTube video description as well afterwards.
Awesome. Okay, so now we've got our top banner image, that image that's going to kind of anchor everything. We've got a couple of different options. Something that I like to do is create kind of a pill, which is just a rounded background title at the top as well. So that's usually the welcome. So we'll say we need to change this. So welcome to forensics. We got Dr. Scully, a forensic pathologist. So what I'm going to have to do here is some more fun stuff in our HTML editor. So this is where we get a little fancier, but first we got to kind of figure out what's our color scheme. How do we want to do that? So I'm probably going to do something like this, where I take and select a color from the web page. Just trying to think of what might be a fun one to go and grab.
It's a pretty monochromatic image in this case.
Yeah. Sometimes you can choose things that are a little bit more intriguing, but what I've done is I've just picked a color. There's a ton of different ways to do this. You can just pick a color that you like as well. Doesn't have to be something like what I'm doing.
And Nick, how are you getting that color code?
So can you see my eyedropper tool?
Yes.
So what I ended up doing is, this is something I use a lot in my work, that just allows me to jump in and grab a color. You could use something like color.adobe.com, and you could search for color schemes. Really, sky's the limit on how you decide that. But the important thing is, once I have a color, in this case, I'm going to be grabbing this one. This is what I'm going to use as my background for that banner. Once I've kind of got an idea, I'm going to go in and I'm going to bring it into a contrast checker. So one of the things that we always want to consider is how accessible our color choices are. So that's text on background kind of contrast. Mm-hmm. This webaim.org has this great color checker that I use all the time. It tells me the contrast ratio. We're always shooting for is basically AA at minimum. And you'll see that if it's normal text, this is actually failing. I believe if I lighten up our background, it will then pass. That's assuming a black foreground on a essentially blue background. Let's try this. I'm going to switch our colors, and then I'm going to bring this all the way to white. Looks like that's not going. So let's come back. I'm going to make this a little darker. There we go. And I'm going to use this color just for the sake of today, but you could see how you could kind of be really persnickety about it and kind of play around. Do you want black text on a colored background, white text on a darker colored background? But usually I don't change the text color between black or white. I kind of just stick with those. Otherwise you can get into some dangerous territory with people that might be living with color blindness. So that's why I usually stick to those two. So here, this is going to be my background. And now this is where things are going to get a little bit, I'll say a little bit more tricky. I'm going to jump into our HTML editor, and I'm going to look for that heading. So it's my first heading, it's my level 2 heading. Anytime I'm changing the style of one of these things, and let me actually make this a little bit bigger. That probably make it a little bit easier for y'all to see.
That's good.
Starting with style equals, and then a quotation mark. And here I'm going to choose that background color. So I'm literally going to write out background dash color. There's that hex code. So you'll see most of these colors when you're using something like WebAIM, gives you this hex code. That's essentially what HTML uses to determine what color it's going to display. So there's our background color. Then let's see, I want the color of my text to be, what did we choose? White, perfect. So that's going to simply be color. I don't remember, I think it's 6. But anyway, white. So I could also have gotten that from here. And then to make it a little bit more interesting, currently it's just going to be a big block on the screen. But actually, let's take a look at what that looks like first. Let's come back out. Let's save. Let's see what our page is looking like so far. Oh, we lost it. Give it another shot. Let's see what's going on here. Background. Oh, we lost everything. Okay. So something.
Nicole says you didn't close your quote.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. So
this is always the fun stuff when you start playing with the HTML in here. And what I always say is, you know, if this feels like it's a little outside of your comfort zone, just come and talk to us and we can help build some of this stuff. We're happy to do that.
And I will say, usually when it comes to coding, it's user error in this case.
Pretty much always you didn't have the right quotation marks in the right place.
There we go. Let's see. Did did something wrong again. Because everything.
That looks right.
The P margin.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
I used to do web pages, so I've gotten
You know the drill.
those.
There we go.
So my mistake from last time was kind of maintaining. There we go. Okay, there we go. Much better. So fixed our mistake. Didn't take too long. So now we got our background color, color of our text. I'm going to do something that I do a lot, which is I'm going to Command A or Control A and copy the entire block of this so I don't lose it in case I mess something up. There we go. So we've got welcome to forensics. It's all right, just a big banner across. What I'm going to do right now, though, is I'm going to stay out of our HTML editor, and then I'm going to go over and center a line. And then it looks kind of meh right now. So I'm going to jump back in and I'm going to do something that I do a lot of the time. I'm going to add something called a border radius. About 5 pixels. But what that's going to do is that's going to round the edges. And it makes things look kind of like buttons, or we're going to use it quite a bit, but it's just an easy thing that changes and softens the actual title. So let's make sure I did it right. Save and take a look. And you can kind of see it's rounded around the edges. I think that actually lined up pretty well between the eye and that. Cool. So now we've got our first part. I'm going to double check our chat. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Totally messed that up. So yeah, and Nicole's saying lots of Chrome extensions. Yep, tons of great ones. And yes, changing the color in the code page or our HTML editor sometimes can be a lot easier than actually messing around with it in our normal editor. So that's usually for me a little bit faster because I can have a little bit more control. All right, so now kind of have that above the fold, as Caleb would call it, the important information. We got big image to anchor, we got our actual title, and then we have the stuff that students would actually be looking for. And since I did that little coding mess up, I lost my image, but it's okay because we're going to actually do something to add everything back in. So one of the things that I think is kind of a struggle is this top-down approach makes it really long and a lot of scrolling to get through all this content. If you're on a phone, you're going to be sitting there for quite a while just to get to the bottom. So in this case, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit, I'm going to actually use a table to format, which if you've done any web editing or web design, that's usually a very big no-no, because if somebody has, say, a screen reader, sometimes it doesn't go through the information exactly how you want, and it can cause issues. So generally, my rule of thumb for actually formatting with a table in Canvas is to just use 2 columns, as many rows as you need. That way, the first column will act as essentially the heading. So for example, contact information, and then it would go to this block, office hours, and then to the right would be this block, just to once again condense things, but also that makes it a lot easier if somebody's going through with a screen reader, because it usually will go left to right down the grid.
Yep.
So this part is nice because we don't have to do it in code. If you've ever done a table in code, you know tables can be a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to insert table, and I'm actually going to double check. I've got this block here, and then I've got, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. So I'm going to come back up, table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to do the 2, and it also makes it a little bit easier on mobile if you only do 2 like that. And then I'm just going to start copying and pasting this information. So I'm going to double check. Perfect. That's set as a paragraph. Throw it up in here. Great thing about the table is it will put information, it'll condense and expand as it needs to. And that's kind of the formatting trick that we we need, especially if we're moving something or having something accessed on a mobile device and we don't have access to fancier HTML or CSS tools. So I'm just going to go through and do this riveting copy and paste job. And while I'm doing that, you might start to notice as I'm putting this information into our table, everything looks kind of condensed. The text is touching all the way to the outside of the box. It's a little.
This makes it feel kind of visually cramped.
Yeah, and we're in the editor right now, but you'll kind of see. Oops, make sure I don't do that. You'll kind of see what I mean when I save, so we can kind of see a more complete view. So let's take a look at where we are right now. So this is where we'll put that image that we kind of lost a little bit earlier, but yeah, very cramped. Sometimes it can be difficult for people to read when the text is so close to those internal borders. So one thing you could do is you could take away all borders, which would be fine. Another option, so you can do that by going and clicking into that table in the editor. And this is a low code option that I appreciate that Canvas gives us. I can jump into our table properties, which is that first option, click in, and there's this thing called cell padding. And padding is essentially a cushion of blank space around any content. So in this case, this cell padding is actually the difference between the text and the lines around it. So in this case, I'll probably add 5 pixels. Right now, it's set at 96. I'm not going to change the width. That's probably just fine. Alignment, I'm not going to change any of that. That's good. I double check that advanced. So borders are already on, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'm just going to worry about this cell padding. It's going to give us a little bit more space around the edges. I'm going to try
it's actually not going to show anything until you hit save.
Thanks, Caleb.
Yeah.
I'm used to working in the editor for that stuff. There we go, much better. So now we've got that little bit of blanket, of cushion. It just spreads everything out, makes it a little bit easier for us to work with.
And
So
Nicole
now,
has a question in the chat. Will you let you do percentages for padding? And I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no. It really wants, I think it wants a pixel number for padding, doesn't it?
You know, I haven't tested it out, but if you were going to be using percentages, that's something that I would just say, jump into that HTML editor and run with. But we can give it a shot here because if I remember correctly, the width will accept a percentage.
Yep.
Let's see what a 1% padding will do. Looks like it did adjust. So that means potentially.
Doesn't look like it like that.
It would give us more padding as we got larger. So yeah, looks like it didn't like it.
So yeah, for that padding, when you're adding padding to a table, stick with pixels.
Stick with 10. That seemed to look better.
And then Nick, we should also maybe shrink that left column a little bit because I don't think it needs to be quite that large, does it?
Yeah, I don't believe so either. So first, I'm actually going to add that image back because we lost Scully, and that's kind of the, you know, you want to keep those headshots, those pictures of yourselves. And my alt text was a little lazy there. It looks like Dr. Scully is filling that out, but let's actually drop it down a little bit. And then we can bring in those edges. And the great thing about our table here is it's going to change the width automatically to a percentage. So it'll adjust with whatever screen we're looking at. So right now we've got that formatted pretty easily. We've got our office hours information. So far, Canvas has done a lot of the work for us in doing the formatting, which is nice. Doesn't like to do that most of the time. So we're kind of forcing it to work with us.
And already this looks a huge improvement over just the basic single column of text. Yeah, and Nicole is talking about divs, which is like a coding tool for making columns and boxes and stuff, which is more flexible in many ways, but it's also a lot of work. And unless you're very HTML savvy, you probably don't even want to go there. This is kind of a simple way of controlling that formatting a little better. And so then Jared was asking about the accessibility concerns for tables. So generally, the reason we are wary of using tables for layout is because of the way a screen reader reads out a table, right? If somebody is blind or vision impaired and uses a screen reader, when a screen reader gets to a table, it will say cell 1, and then it will read out the content of cell 1. Cell 2, and it'll read out the content of cell 2. If you were using a very complicated table with lots of columns and lots of sizes, and you just have graphics and things in each cell of the table, it's going to kind of turn into word salad for a user on a screen reader. The reason I don't think it's a big deal in this specific use case is because we have descriptive cell titles for each row, basically. So in this case, what a student with a screen reader is going to hear is cell 1, Dana Scully. Cell 2, the text of that introduction. Cell 3, contact information. Cell 4, please contact me with questions, blah, blah, blah. So that, from a screen reader perspective, that is fairly accessible and fairly clear. But you're correct that in general, we want to be careful about how we use tables. We shouldn't use tables purely for decorative reasons, because that's when you start getting into some real accessibility issues for screen readers.
And that's also that kind of 2-column rule. Sticking to that helps kind of give us a little bit of a safety buffer.
Yeah.
And something I'm about to do as well is currently these are set as heading level 3. This is my heading level 2. But if I select these these rows, bear with me, I'll have to, there we go. I can go into our table properties. I can go to advanced, and it should, oh, that's weird. It's not letting me set it as a, that's intriguing. You can set these as row. I'll have to double check where that went, because normally you would be able
column
to
headers.
Yeah, and you can make row headers and column headers. In this instance, I was going to make these row headers, so somebody with screen reader would know contact information goes here. Office hours associated with this, and vice versa. So I'll do some playing around to make sure that that's still available to us. If not, you can get around it using the HTML editor, but we're trying to do as little coding to make this look good as possible. With that, that does bring me to another item that I think might be useful for everybody here, and that is icons. There's a lot of use of icons in web to, once again, it's that idea of an image. It takes you a lot less time to understand an image than it does to read something out. So I like to use icons to signify where an email is on a page, with some sort of email icon or a phone number or XYZ, that kind of thing. So generally what I do would be insert an icon, but I've been finding that a lot of icons don't translate over to mobile devices well, or they don't scale with the text well. So I don't know if you kind of saw up here at the top, I've got something called Emojipedia open. This might be a little bizarre, but emojis are actually a really easy way for us to use icons that we know will work on a mobile device and already have alt text associated with them, so a screen reader can understand what it is. And some screen readers will just ignore them altogether. The thing with emojis is we don't want to use multiple in one line. So if I had an emoji of a phone, I would not use more than one, because any screen reader would then go phone, 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 or, you know, you kind of get the idea. It'll say it however many times it is there. It becomes a word once we bring it into that setting. So in this case, I'm going to look up email. And the great thing about Emojipedia is it gives you a lot of options for keywords. So I might choose little email emoji. It lets you copy it. And that's going to be very small for you all. But if I make it a little bit larger, there we go. That's the icon I'm going to use. You can also see what it looks like across devices, which is also very helpful. So I want to make sure that my meaning doesn't get lost. If somebody's got a Samsung phone or is opening something in Microsoft Edge, there's that element to consider.
So Nick, maybe just briefly, we should really quickly just kind of explain a little bit about what emojis are, just for anyone in the audience that maybe is not super familiar with them. In recent years, especially because so many people are using small devices, cell phones and smartphones and tablets, the organization that basically controls the standards for text and code online has started creating this vast library of emojis, which are these little predetermined icons and symbols. Originally, there was a tiny number of them, but over time, they keep growing that library of emojis. So now there are hundreds, and I think maybe even thousands at this point. But the thing that is nice about emojis is that library of symbols and icons is built into every modern web browser. Whether it's on a cell phone or on your computer, it all has a library of these images just built into it. So one thing that's nice about emojis is it adds that little visual element without taking up any extra bandwidth because they're not downloading images. It's just referencing the images that are already on your device's library of symbols. And then the other thing, like Nick said, they have a built-in alt text to them. So the one that you just grabbed, that email, it is called email. So if a person is using a screen reader that reads out loud emojis, it will just say email. You don't have to worry about the alt text because it is embedded in that emoji symbol that it's referencing.
Then I'll just grab a phone. I'm sure there's plenty. I find it's kind of funny. Everybody probably has a mobile phone now, but for whatever reason, I feel like a telephone or a standard landline makes a lot more sense as an icon. I thought that was really funny as I was kind of working through this. It's like, oh yeah, no, that I haven't used a rotary phone in God knows how long, but that is what I still remember. So you can kind of add these little elements in. You get icons for basically for no accessible loss. That's kind of my big thing.
You can also put emojis in file titles, which I've seen some people do in their Canvas modules. They will just have emoji icons next to each item in their modules. And they'll use them as kind of a standard thing, like all of their quizzes have one emoji and all of their to-do lists have another emoji. And I think that's kind of a neat little visual trick that I've seen some people use.
And it's nice because you can't put, pictures or icons in those titles. That's a great example, Caleb. Okay, I know we're running low on time, but I wanted to show one last thing that I really like that's kind of a quality of life thing for me. So we've got these links down here. And if you remember, we kind of made this border, this banner at the top here. I'm going to use this same style to make buttons. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to call it out because we have so many hyperlinks in here. I want to put these course materials kind of at the forefront of somebody's vision. I want to make sure that they realize, oh, this is important. So we could just have a list of course materials. In this case, we have a getting started module that would link to. We have a module 1 for week of whatever, module 2, so on and so forth. But if I jump into our HTML editor, and I scroll down, scroll, I'm going to look for, here we go, these little titles. So these are internal course links. That's why they have this title there. If it was just set as like an external link, like you're linking to a textbook, like an open educational resource that you use often, you don't have to access a lot, you would be able to find that as well, but it just wouldn't have those elements. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add essentially that pill back in here. So let's do this. This might take a little bit. So we've got, oops, that should be just fine. So style. Color. And for the sake of this, I'm going to use the same color that we've been using. But generally, I would recommend choosing something different just to highlight that this is unique. Otherwise, people could think that it is another banner, though because it'll be underlined, that's usually what clues people into it being a link. But just keep that in mind. I like to have those two items separate, banners and then buttons that are made this way. And then we're going to do border, border radius, pixels, and then let's just kind of see how this.
Do you want to make the text white on that or no?
I will after I make sure it's working.
Oh, okay.
So we've got that. I'm gonna come through here. I'm going to center it. And then, like Caleb said, I'm going to make the text white. And I'll actually just come up here and make it white. So it makes it just a little bit easier on my end. But now I've got a little button that I can use for my formatting. If I put my cursor, my blinking cursor at the end of this hyperlink and press enter, it'll just make a new one, which I found out the other day, which I love. So I can basically, oh, there's all my modules, write everything in, module one, however you want to write it out. I highlight, and then I go to insert, I find my link, I could jump into my course links, go into my modules, select my module one, it's all done. You'll notice when they're done that way, they still maintain the white text, but then they also have the animated underline. You should be able to quickly change that just by making it white again. Or you can keep it if you like it. But now I can just go through and quickly come down the list, make my list of modules, students will be able to access them. And then I've got basically all the information that students might need to get started in my course. You can change the width of these to kind of shrink them down as you need. You can do all sorts of fun stuff, but now you've got hopefully a couple more tools at your disposal. One thing I'm just going to do, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I'm going to come down to this image and I'm going to center align it because that was bugging me. There we go. Much better. I've solved everything now. Now Dana will stay in the middle. Perfect.
And that is a fairly straightforward, simple, but I think nice looking homepage. Much more visually appealing than just a single column of text. It's fairly mobile friendly. So if you're on a mobile device, it's still going to look good. And hopefully those little visual elements and visual cues make it clear to students what's going on here. And I think it's great.
Well, I've gone 10 minutes over time and I knew I'd do something like that. So if you need to go, get out of here, go live your life. If you want to stay and chat, we're here, more than available. But thank you so much for listening today. We covered a lot. Email us if you need anything, all the fun stuff.
All right. Thanks for joining us for today's Tech Talks. Next week, we are going to talk about Course Hero. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, yeah.
That should be an interesting conversation for sure.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming, Nicole.
It's always good to see you.